This is not a Delta Airlines flight flying over top of Walmart, making a right-hand turn and turning into a ball, okay? This is... I don't care what it sounds like, okay? They're doing this on purpose. Please, have an open mind here. That is so freaking cool. Look at this. They're simulating this, okay? This is a simulation on top of Walmart. Look at all the birds. Where did it just go? Holy shit. Top of Walmart Supercenter off US 1. This is not an aircraft, trust me. The sound is way off. Yeah, it's still going. You see how the birds are following?
Yeah, that cloud's a beautiful picker in Florida. What are you looking at?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm filming something.
Okay.
Look at that.
What are you looking at? What are you looking at?
Alright, I'm about to explain your entire existence in a way you've never heard it before. Do not skip this video. I repeat, do not skip this video. Alright, so your entire reality is made up of these three things. First off, we have light itself, which is light waves, or also called spirit, which is what moves through you. We also have darkness, which can be also called creation or particle. This is like objects you see in front of you. This is the mind. Next, we have the body, which can also be called your unique lens or your soul. This is what you view reality through. Your body is special because it's both light and particle. It is both of these at the same time. This can be called non-duality, but you can also be referred to as duality. The reason for this is as a human, you are one with everything, but you are also separate from everything. You can also say that you are the creator, but also the creation itself. In your experience, as you go throughout life, light is passing through you. These waves of energy pass through every human that you see in your experience. Yes, the same waves pass through every single person. But it's what we do with these waves, our interactions with them, that create our experience. These waves can also be referred to as energy in motion or emotion. When you have reality moving through you in this form, it is called allowing. You are not resisting the flow of reality passing through you. This means light can pass through you effortlessly. This is also called enlightenment. Enlightenment is just the amount of light that passes through your body, and the rate at which it passes through can also affect your experience. Being more open means that more light can pass through you at a time, meaning that reality is experienced at a faster rate and you also see more of it. Someone who allows light to pass through them in this way without any resistance whatsoever could be equated to Jesus walking on water. Because of the waves, they look like water. In this energy here, you can also have thoughts passing through the mind, but these thoughts are not disrupting you. You are observing the mind. You are allowing thoughts to pass through you without resisting the natural flow of thoughts that come up in you. The desires that flow into your mind, you do not resist them. So you are having thoughts, but they are just naturally flowing through you. Versus, as I said before, we also have particle. When there is a thought that you resist in your experience, when there's a thought that doesn't naturally pass through you, what happens is you create this sort of line down the body where you block the flow of energy through you. Essentially, you pause your reality, you pause the flow of things, which is why a lot of people say they feel stuck in life. What thoughts do normally is that they separate light. They create a sort of cut in the natural flow of energy, or a break, you could say. Once you release a thought, what happens is that thought then returns to a wave again. This is also what we call collapsing reality. We form a particle in our mind, we have a thought, and then we allow it to collapse back into a wave, and it continues on passing through as energy once again. What you may notice is that it looks like a line is being crossed here. Essentially, this is like Jesus in the Bible. Your old reality, or the old version of you, is being collapsed in that moment. So now a new version of you, new energy can flow in. This is also why in the Bible, where they say Jesus returns 3 days later, they're actually referring to the fact that Jesus returns not in the past, the present, but in the future. Essentially, the past is becoming the future. What you left behind, that version of you that you decided on, that thought that you decided on, flows through you and then returns to you later on. The reason for this is because life is like a cycle. Everything moves in a circular motion. A way I used to describe it in my older videos was that you leave a checkpoint behind you. Think of you running on a running track and you have a checkpoint behind you. And now you're going to go around the track and you're going to meet that checkpoint again in the future. And that will now be your future reality, but expanded. On top of this, you can meet it faster in so-called time, the sooner you let go of it and the faster you can move forwards. And forwards motion, forwards action is really just allowing energy once again to pass through you. This means being able to move on to the next thought, to be able to let go of the current thought that you're stuck on. If you have a problem you're stuck on, you let it go. You don't hang on to the problem. Because you can never find the solution if you keep staring at the problem. You have to let it go so that the solution can come back around to you. You have to let go your experience that you want to experience so that you can experience it. If you keep observing it, you keep it in this particle form and you stop energy from passing through you. Now, I said earlier, if you want to experience your desired reality faster, then what you have to do is you have to create a larger magnetic field. The more that you allow light to pass through the body, the more you allow it to move through you easily without disruption, you start to create this larger magnetic field. Once again, all you can think of it as is a portal that's getting bigger and you're allowing more and more light to move through you at one time. At the same time, as you're doing this, you are in the present moment. You're paying attention to your current experience because to allow anything to pass through you, you have to be in the present moment. You have to be paying attention to what you're doing right now. To be in the present moment is to allow. Staying present or grounded starts to create this larger magnetic field around you because you create a pinpoint in time or a focal point for everything to move around. If you're constantly in your mind thinking thoughts and you're not grounded at the same time, what happens is this field gets smaller and it gets chaotic because now it's harder to tell where this specific point is where you are. So reality is not circling around you evenly. You can look up the uncertainty principle if you want to know what I'm talking about here. It's harder to pinpoint a particle when you are moving around all the time. So essentially, think of yourself in the present moment. You're right here, you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're in the moment, and then as you're in this moment, this field is growing bigger and bigger and bigger around you, and then what's happening now is this field you're creating is now pulling things in towards you. It's pulling your reality into the middle towards you. Light is being bent or pulled towards the present moment. You can also think of it as someone giving you a hug. It's like the arms, your past and future are the arms of the body, and they're getting wrapped around you. The past and the future are becoming one around you. So now this circle we saw earlier with the checkpoint becomes smaller. You no longer have to travel so far around the circle to reach your checkpoint because you pulled reality in towards you. So now the checkpoint becomes much smaller. The circle you have to travel becomes much smaller, meaning you experience your experience you want to have much, much faster, as in it could almost be in the present moment that you experience it because you're pulling it in towards you rather than what most people do is that they chase it around this big circle, not being in the present moment. They chase their experience, never meeting up with it because it keeps moving away from them. Versus if you stay in the present moment and you just pull things in towards you, they come to you. You don't have to go anywhere to get it. It comes to you. Just to explain thoughts a little bit more to you, think of this energy passing through you, this light, as these waves, and then every thought you have is a thought of creation. Like this is solid right here, this is light, and you're creating these boxes in your mind every single time that you have a thought. So you have these lines with empty space in between each of them. It pretty much looks like a film reel from a movie. Now, as I just said, there's empty spaces here. So what happens is your higher self then comes in and it fills in these gaps between your thoughts to make for a full experience. As in, multiple thoughts are connected by experiences that are interjected into the light by the higher mind. So the light that's right here, more thoughts are interjected into here. More experiences for you to have are interjected to connect the thoughts so that they make sense. This could also be called co-creation. You're creating with your higher self. So you create the thought that you want to experience, and then the higher self interjects all of these connecting things to make it make sense. This is also called the Bridge of Incidents by Neville Goddard. So all these little dots here are just more thoughts. They're more experiences that are coming in to fill the gap. And you also can think of this as how solid objects are formed. All these particles building up right here creates solid experience. It creates a box that's filled with a bunch of particles. This is also what expansion is. Your higher mind takes your thought and adds on to it to connect it with the next. It can also look like this, like a flip book of pictures, just a bunch of lines that you're experiencing very, very quickly. Reality is just like a series of photos. Ultimately, this is what it ends up looking like. This is basically a black hole that expands and contracts just like the Big Bang that happens over and over and over. You have both particle and you have wave, so you constantly have the past becoming the future and the future becoming the past. You have both light over here with expansion, and then you have particle down over here. As they say, matter and energy are interchangeable. We always hear people say, I'm pushing myself, as in pushing yourself. We have pulled backwards, getting pulled backwards into the black hole. Going down the rabbit hole, we have hitting rock bottom. We also have people saying the light at the end of the tunnel. All you're really doing your entire life is rearranging creation into the order that you like it to be in. You're taking what already exists and expanding it outward so you can see more of it. That's it. That's reality.
Watch closely. This footage was captured by a photographer traveling in China. In the video, you can see an old man standing next to a large tree. Suddenly, a black hole appears in the tree, and the man vanishes, just like magic. The magic he used is known as wood escape technique in Chinese Taoist culture. It is one of the 5-element escape techniques, utilizing the wood element to quickly hide or transfer. By touching a tree, the practitioner can instantly escape and reappear near another tree within 300 meters. They can also remain hidden within the tree for a long time. However, if the tree they are hiding in is cut down or burned, the practitioner will also die. Additionally, practitioners need to coexist with trees for a long time to enhance their usage frequency and range.
Dude, oh hell no. Did you see the video that girl made from Australia about quantum immortality? About what happened to her when she was a kid? If you haven't seen it, and I can't find it, but I remember what she said. So this girl is from the land down under, from Australia. She said that her class, and she was a kid at the time, I assume between 12 to 14. They had gotten snow, but they had to take like an 18-hour bus ride to get down to where the snow was. All of them went. So they get down to where they're going skiing and snowboarding, and she is a beginner, okay? She is not well-versed in boarding at all. So the course that they are on is kind of close to where the cabin area is and this railway system that takes you back and forth. So her friends are rounding the mountain, and they're just a little ways in front of her, and then it's just her because she's kind of scooching along, and there's people behind her. So when she gets around the edge of the mountain, she expects to see them in front of her, okay, because it's a straight shot. Nothing. And she's like, that's weird. And so the people, she gets down a little ways, and she's like, what happened to the people that were behind me? At this point, she's starting to get scared. You got to remember, she's just a kid. She said she walked for what felt like hours, and finally, she runs into an old, it looks like it hadn't been used in years, abandoned, dilapidated, dusty, musty, crusty ski lift. And she knows that soon the sun is going to be setting. That's how long she's been walking. We went from the story being at morning till night. So she's like, I'm going to take a chance and try to climb this thing, and maybe I'll be able to see the clubhouse lodge. So she figures if she can kind of get up high enough that she'll be able to see this lodge, because it's, all the lights are going to be on because of the time of day that it is. She gets up to the top section, nothing for miles, and it's about to be dark. She's panicked. She starts to cry. She's calling out for help to the point where she's hoarse. But do you remember when I told you about there was a subway system thing that brought them back and forth? She saw this light off in the distance. Doesn't know where it came from. It was supposed to be there. And she remembers it being there, but she also remembers being able to see the cabins, the clubhouse from the ski lift they were on earlier that day, and none of that was. So she follows the light, gets over there to it, and it's an active subway. She says she gets on it, gets to where there's other people. It takes her to a cabin, okay, where her friends still are. And she walks in and they're all eating and stuff. And she's like, no one was looking for me. And they're like, hey, Chloe. Just like nothing had ever happened. The next couple of days, she refuses to leave the cabin. She is scared shitless. So their trip concludes and they all board the buses and they go back home. She gets home and she's talking to her sister, telling her sister what happened. And she's like, what? And she starts noticing how things are slightly but not completely off. The stuff in her room, just little things that she knew were certain places and exactly where they belonged, and they were moved. And she notices little things with her parents and her sister, like differences in their personalities. So she surmises what happened is that she ended up not finding anybody in that reality, and that she jumped over to another reality where there was the subway still, which means she would have had to jump twice. I know. Isn't that crazy?
How does Jesus absorb Eve's curses in the gospel? So Eve is given two specific curses. The first one is increased pains in childbirth. And you think, okay, well, Jesus was a man, so clearly he's not having children. So how does that work? Well, he uses this language, like when he talks with Nicodemus in John chapter 3, and he confuses Nicodemus because he says to enter into the kingdom of God or to inherit the kingdom of God, what do you have to do? You have to be born again. Well, for you to be born again, who is it that suffers the pain of that childbirth? Well, that's Christ on the cross. He is the one who bears the pain so that you can be made new, right? So he bears that curse in a far more intense way than Eve could have ever dreamed. But then beyond that, it says that, the bride is going to desire the husband, but he'll rule over her. Jesus knows what it's like to desperately love a bride who rules over him and ultimately puts him on a cross. So he can relate and absorb those curses of Eve and say, mine, so that you can be free, I'll take them.
Scientists have figured out that once an animal becomes fully aquatic, it can no longer, on an evolutionary level, return to land. Welcome back to Paleopedia, and 350 to 400 million years ago is when vertebrate life in the form of early fish evolved to be able to spend extended periods of time out of the water. These fishes, which were very much restricted to the water's edge and were very awkward on land, eventually evolved to become every species of tetrapod that exists even today. Tetrapods are vertebrates with 4 limbs and distinct digits, so this would include the reptiles, the mammals, and the amphibians. Now, of course, classification on a scientific level, especially when it comes to evolution, isn't all as black and white, which is why there are some animals like whales, legless lizards, and birds that are also considered tetrapods, but that's the general gist of it. And while the transition from ocean to land on an evolutionary level only really happened once, the transition from land back to the ocean has happened multiple times over several hundred million years. The greatest example of this return from land to sea are the whales and the dolphins. They, around 50 million years ago, began that evolutionary transition from land to sea, becoming fully aquatic around 30 million years ago. And since this transition from land to sea has happened several times on an evolutionary level, scientists have had the question of, can those animals that transition from land back to the sea transition again from sea back to the land a second time? And now it seems as though they have an answer. This study, which was published back in mid-July, looked at 5,600 mammalian species, and they found that the move from land to sea in the whales is likely irreversible. Now, the idea that evolution is not always reversible was first put forward by Belgian paleontologist Louis Dallo in the 19th century. This principle, known as Dallo's law, states that once a complex trait is lost in a lineage over time on an evolutionary level, the odds of it reappearing in the future in that lineage is very unlikely. To test this idea of Darwin's law in mammalian evolution, the researchers put all of these mammal species that they looked at into 4 different categories: fully terrestrials, semi-aquatic with good locomotion on land, semi-aquatics with not so good locomotion on land, and fully aquatics, the whales and the sirenians. The researchers then examined evolutionary relationships among species that have branches that indicate a common ancestry. Then, by comparing traits among these species, they were able to estimate the probability of evolving specific traits. The study found that there is a threshold between semi-aquatic and fully aquatic lifestyles, and once that threshold has been passed, the adaptations in aquatic animals are basically irreversible. The transitions to aquatic environments are linked to several evolutionary changes, including a larger body size for heat retention and a mostly carnivorous lifestyle to keep up with the heightened metabolism. These types of changes make it very difficult to evolve back to a land-based lifestyle. Basically, it is possible to go from fully terrestrial to semi-aquatic in small evolutionary steps, but to go from semi-aquatic to fully aquatic require very big changes that can't be reversed. It's important to note that this study only looked at mammalian evolution, because today, the only animals that still exist that went from a fully terrestrial to a fully aquatic lifestyle are the whales and the sirenians, dugongs and manatees. So it's possible that the other tetrapod groups, amphibians and reptiles, could evolve to be fully aquatic and then potentially re-evolve to become fully terrestrial again, but we'd have to see if a new study would come out to see if that would actually be the case. But for those of us who were hoping that we could maybe get actual land whales again, it looks like the odds of that happening are virtually zero.
People who found themselves in museums. Look at this. Are they time travelers or what are the thoughts of this? Man, imagine going in a museum and finding a picture of yourself there. And allegedly, you're back then from Stone Age. My God, this is crazy. Something that can shock you, man. Oh, this guy was painted years and years and years ago, man. But his great-grandparents really used to resemble one another. Maybe these looks have been a family thing. Or what do you think, my friends? Please leave your comments there. But the man there had even the same clothes he had on the painting. This is crazy. How is this possible? Oh my God. Even this baby had a photo of themselves from the past. Some of these things, my friends, are hard to explain.
So most psychologists would agree that the indicators of a criminal background would come from one of 2 things. Number 1 is the environment that you grew up in, and number 2 would be the family that you grew up in. The more of these things you have working against you, the higher adversity you should expect to receive in your adulthood. So if that's the case, then this man right here, Jabez, is a model of what it takes to provoke divine favor despite adverse circumstances. His story is found in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, and there's only 2 verses in the entire Bible that are dedicated to him. Yet, despite such little information, what we do know about Jabez is something was off. The reason we know this is because the name Jabez means sorrow. And coming from a culture where your name was literally your identity, to name your child Jabez would be like a modern day Jew naming their child Auschwitz. We also know that Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and this says a lot about who Jabez was. You see, despite the fact that he lived in a culture where your name defined your identity, Jabez decided that the identity given to him was not going to be the identity that he adopted. I feel like that's a word for someone. You come from a family of underachievers, and so the world expects you to be an underachiever, but you refuse to adopt that identity. You come from a lineage where every single person in your family has been divorced, yet you refuse to adopt that identity. The question then becomes, how do you provoke divine favor? And let me show you what Jabez did. He prayed a prayer that had 4 specific points. Point number 1, Lord, would you bless me? You have to believe that you were created for a purpose, and within you is a seed that will help you accomplish that purpose. A seed means beginning. It means something you have been given can create everything that you have been promised. In Proverbs 18:16, one of my all-time favorite scriptures, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Your seed and your gift are interchangeable. If you can identify, master, and then deploy your gift, look what happens. It makes room for you and brings you in front of great people. Notice that it is your gift that makes room for you, not your mouth. In other words, seek competence before you seek visibility. If you seek competence first, visibility will come naturally. If you seek visibility first, you'll simply just show everyone how incompetent you are. Notice this right here. Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Wisdom, he increased in competence, and his increase in competence brought him visibility. That visibility allowed him to be blessed by God and by man. The second prayer point, would you enlarge my territory? The land in Israel was divided amongst all the families. Every family had an inheritance that was passed on from generation to generation. And the law of Jubilee would also state that every 50 years, any land that was lost or sold to somebody else was restored back to its rightful owner. Jabez is asking God to bring him into a territory where he can continue to use his gift to expand his influence. This third prayer point is where it really gets good, because you can now see the motivation behind why Jabez is asking. He says, "Let your hand be with me." Throughout scripture, the hand of God is used metaphorically for several different things, but it all comes back to one thing: power. Here, Jabez is asking God that let your power be with me so that you bless my gift, you enlarge my influence in a way where I have no choice but to rely on your power to sustain it. In other words, help me increase my faith so that I can experience more of your power. And then lastly, he says, keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. The King James Version says, would you keep me from evil so that it may not grieve me? But I chose this version for a specific reason. You see, Jabez's mom named him after her pain, yet here's Jabez saying, God, would you keep me free from pain? God, would you save me from myself? When you are operating in the will of God, there is no evil that anyone can wish upon your life that will work unless you move out of the will of God. And the devil understands that the way that we move out of the will of God is through our natural desires. Keep me away from myself. Maybe it's anger, alcohol, lust, greed. Jabez understands that the more influence that God gives him, the more that God blesses him, the more he will be likely to succumb to his vices. This is a prayer point of humility. And lastly, it says that God granted him that which he requested. I always wonder, how many times did Jabez pray that prayer? I even wonder, at what point do you think Jabez realized that God answered that prayer? Nevertheless, it doesn't matter because a town gets named after Jabez, so clearly something he did worked. And this prayer seems to be working in my life, so why wouldn't it work in yours?
Wow, my friend, that last video, what a very interesting and motivating story. Story from the book of wisdom, my friend, which you shall wrap up by reading from. Thanks for leaving your comments today, by the way. God bless you. This is what the book tells us. I know that the Lord secures justice for the poor and upholds the cause of the needy. Surely the righteous will praise your name, and the upright will live before you. That is Psalm 140 from 12 going down. Now, interesting soul, my friend. Let's talk to our Supreme Creator as we call this show a wrap. Well, Father, thank you for this time that we have come to reach the conclusion of this video. All glory and honor, Father, belong unto you. Dear Lord, today you had united us with your child here, today's viewer. I really thank you for their lives, Father, for your breath in them and your goodness. Thank you for the blessings that you have extended in their lives, Father, as you are watching the videos. Dear Lord, also forgive us all our sins which we might have committed in any way. Come in our lives, Father, and help us as a family, dear Lord, to grow in numbers and in faith. In your holy name, Jesus Christ, we do pray, trusting and believing. Amen. Till next time, my friends, peace and love be with you. I've been White311H. Check out this episode here or this one